Now, this graphic actually shows just that. What you see is the brain, and you see the neurons and the synapses connecting them. We're born with about 2,500 synapses. By age 3, we have 15,000. And then over time, those connections are actually pruned in response to the external stimulation, the external world that we live in. Now, to give you another example of that, this is the breathing pattern of a one-day-old infant listening to music. And you can see here that he's listening to Mozart, and then Stravinsky is put on, and then Mozart again. Now, I show you this not to present some kind of an infantile critique of classical music, but and those of you in the audience who are classic music aficionados might have a hypothesis about why Stravinsky did this to his breathing pattern. But the point is that even at one day of life, there's a discernible physiological reaction to what babies are actually hearing. And this is important because we're technologizing childhood today in a way that's unprecedented. In 1970, the average age at which children began to watch television regularly was 4 years, like this cute little girl here. And today, based on research that we've done, it's 4 months. It's not just how early they watch, but how much they watch. The typical child before the age of 5 is watching about 4.5 hours of TV a day. That represents as much as 40% of their waking hours. Which brings us to Baby Einstein. Now, many of you probably have not seen Baby Einstein, but I will show you a random 20-second clip from Baby Einstein Day on the Farm, and here it is. In that 20-second clip, there were 7 scene changes, about 1 every 3 seconds. It's about the most exhausting day on the farm since John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. And of course, it's nothing like being on a real farm, right? Adults watching this find it discombobulating because your mind is trying to make a coherent narrative out of this, and there is no coherent narrative. It jumps all over the place. But babies aren't trying to make a coherent narrative out of it. They're not capable of doing that. It's all of that screen change, all of that stimulation that's keeping them actually engaged in the screen. So we've had for a while what we call the overstimulation hypothesis, which is that prolonged exposure to this rapid image change during this critical window of brain development would precondition the mind to expect high levels of input, and that would lead to inattention in later life. So you watch enough Baby Einstein Day on the Farm as a baby, and when you go to a farm as a school-age child, it's boring. It's too slow. How come there's no sheep suddenly popping into my face? How come there's no marionette going back and forth? Why do I have to walk from here to there? That's the general idea, that you're conditioning the mind to that reality, which doesn't actually exist. And we tested this some years ago, and what we found was that the more television children watched before age 3, the more likely they were to actually have attentional problems at school age. Specifically, for each hour that they watched before the age of 3, their chances of having attentional problems was increased by about 10%. Now, in the last year, we've been building actually a mouse model of television viewing in my lab, and they have speakers above and lights around them. And what we do is we start about 10 days of life, and these mice watch TV 6 hours a day for 42 days. It's basically their entire childhood spent in front of a television, which is not uncommon these days for some children even. And then 10 days later, we actually assess their behavior in a few ways I want to show with you. The first test we do measures their activity and risk-taking. Now, we do what's called the open field test. Now, mice have 2 kind of competing instincts. You'll see them here. One is to avoid being in the middle of anything because, of course, mice have very few friends, and being in the middle of this open field is risky. But, of course, they have a competing instinct to forage for food. So at some point, they do need to go into the middle and explore their environment. Now, we put these mice in here and test them, and we exploit the fact that it's a white mouse on a black background, and with a computer above, we can actually track their movement. And you can see on the left is sort of a normal mouse spending most of its time around the perimeter. But look at the one on the right. Notice how much time it spends in the middle, but also notice just how much general activity this mouse is actually exhibiting. So this is both a hyperactive and a risk-taking mouse. And when we look at our overstimulated compared to our control mice, we find that the overstimulated mice spend more time in the center, and they enter the center more than the regular mice do. The next test we do is what's called the novel object recognition, and this tests short-term memory and learning. We put a mouse in a box with two objects, and the mouse will explore both of them, get to know them, if you will. And then we take the mouse out, and an hour later we replace one object with a novel object. And we see how much time the mouse spends on each object. Now, the mouse that is learning, that has good short-term memory, will spend more time on the novel object. And you can see that here, as opposed to the one on the right, which is spending the same amount of time with both objects. And what did we find? Well, we found that our control mice, our normal mice, spent 75% of their time with a novel object. But look at what our TV viewing, our overstimulated mice did. They spent the exact same amount of time. It was as if they couldn't distinguish the two objects or they didn't care. But one way or another, they were not learning. They were not acting like normal mice.
Now, I also mentioned, too, that a fellow that has been in touch with me for an awful long time, his brother was in the CIA, or is in the CIA. He will never talk about the CIA to him. He'll never give anything away whatsoever, except one bit of advice. He said, never watch the television. Never watch the television. It's the greatest scientific indoctrination tool ever devised. Haven't you figured that out? It's changed the whole culture of nations, not just one nation. Why do you think it was mandatory that everybody in Britain have access to televisions by the government? Why do you think China is under the same program to get everyone with a TV right now? Because they love to have you entertained. Do you really think that? And India is on the same route as well right now too.
Part of the toxicity is in believing that what's happening is real. And living an artificial life, having friends on television and spending time and experiencing life, but you're not experiencing it with your body. You're not experiencing it with smell, with taste, with sight, that kind of experience that you have by being present. Just as, you know, you can do all sorts of interesting things, video games, whatever, it's not like getting on a horse with the smell of a horse and the feel of the horse and riding that horse. We're not present in our bodies. We don't carry wood like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was magnanimous physically. He was the most balanced of the human beings, as well as spiritually. He was physically well balanced. He had broad shoulders and a full chest. And when he spoke to people, he turned his entire being to speak with them. He was present because he was in a state of dhikr, in a state of dhikr of all times. Or to be the Quran walking means he was totally present. He was not in some fantasy world or abstracted. We live in a time of abstraction with little screens that we think are a reality. We spend hours in front of this thing sometimes. And it all happens with our body just going rigid, shutting down. Our breathing less and less and less, and chronic illness comes from all of this.
Edward George Ruddy died today. Edward George Ruddy was the chairman of the board of the Union Broadcasting Systems, and he died at 11 o'clock this morning of a heart condition, and woe is us. We're in a lot of trouble. So, a rich little man with white hair died. What has that got to do with the price of rice, right? And why is that woe to us? Because you people and 62 million other Americans are listening to me right now. Because less than 3% of you people read books. Because the only truth you know is what you get over this tube. Right now, there is an entire generation that never knew anything that didn't come out of this tube. This tube is the gospel, the ultimate revelation. This tube can make or break presidents, popes, prime ministers. This tube is the most awesome goddamn force in the whole godless world. And woe is us if it ever falls into the hands of the wrong people. And that's why woe is us that Edward George Ruddy died. Because this company is now in the hands of CCA, the Communication Corporation of America. There's a new chairman of the board, a man called Frank Hackett, sitting in Mr. Ruddy's office on the 20th floor. And when the 12th largest company in the world controls the most awesome goddamn propaganda force in the whole godless world, who knows what shit will be peddled for truth on this network? So you listen to me. Listen to me. Television is not the truth. Television is a goddamn amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We're in the boredom-killing business. So if you want the truth, go to God. Go to your gurus. Go to yourselves, because that's the only place you're ever going to find any real truth. But man, you're never going to get any truth from us. We'll tell you anything you want to hear. We lie like hell. We'll tell you that Kojak always gets the killer and that nobody ever gets cancer in Archie Bunker's house. And no matter how much trouble the hero is in, don't worry, just look at your watch. At the end of the hour, he's going to win. We'll tell you any shit you want to hear. We deal in illusions, man. None of it is true. But you people sit there day after day, night after night, all ages, colors, creeds. We're all you know. You're beginning to believe the illusions we're spinning here. You're beginning to think that the tube is reality and that your own lives are unreal. You do whatever the tube tells you. You dress like the tube. You eat like the tube. You raise your children like the tube. You even think like the tube. This is mass madness, you maniacs. In God's name, you people are the real thing. We are the illusion. So turn off your television sets. Turn them off now. Turn them off right now. Turn them off and leave them off. Turn them off right in the middle of the sentence I'm speaking to you now. Turn them off.
So this is Anton LaVey. The birth of TV was a magical event foreshadowing its satanic significance. TV's infiltration has been so gradual. You see, khutuwat, it goes slowly, so gradual, so complete that no one even noticed. So people, 50 years ago, you couldn't have shown the violence. It's gradual, but now it's happened. People say, what happened? It was slow. It took time. Shaitan has till Yawm al-Qiyamah. Anzirni. Give me time. And Allah said, you have till Yawm al-Qiyamah. And he said, I'm going to get them all. I'll get them all. He has time. He's slow. He works slow. He works at you slowly. Shaitan takes his time. People don't need to go to church anymore. They get their morality plays from television and the movies. That's what teaches them morality. Many of you already read my writings indicating that TV is the new God. There is a little thing I neglected to mention up till now. Television is the major mainstream infiltration for the new satanic religion. Anton LaVey wrote this. Now, this is a man who had several actors and actresses that were his followers. They were literally his followers. So he's not talking as some kind of marginalized. This is somebody who had influence in Hollywood. And one of his followers had a heavy influence on many of the major directors in the United States. Dajjalic culture. Inni la'undirukumu. I'm going to warn you about the Dajjal. وَمَا مِن نَبِيٍّ إِلَّا وَقَدْ أَنذَرَهُ قَوْمَهُ. No prophet except he warned his people. وَلَكِنِّي سَأَقُولُ لَكُمْ فِيهِ قَوْلًا. I'm going to tell you something لَمْ يَقُلْهُ نَبِيٌّ لِقَوْمِهِ. No prophet said it before him. إِنَّهُ أَعْوَرٌ. He has one eye. وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَيْسَ بِأَعْوَرٌ. He doesn't have one eye, your God. This God has one eye. Why is there so much one-eye symbolism amongst these entertainers? Have you ever seen anybody when you take a picture and he says, hold on, hold on. I've never seen any normal person do that. Why do they do this? Because this is their religion. They worship the one-eyed God. Horus, he's called in Crowley's mythology. Why are they preparing our children for one-eyed characters? Why? Why? The minions. They're actually called the minions in this film. Why are they doing this? Why do they all do these one eyes? What's going on? Why are all their symbols with one eye? What's happening?